Thanks for clicking on the video. Like, subscribe, and share if you find this useful or interesting. Okay, so this is where we left things off. We still have straight lines going from section to section. Right now I'm using a lot of blending to make this section appear curved. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm not 100% sure how far we'll get. Here, I have replaced all the curves on the bottom from straight lines to actual curves. And you can see now that I have curvature in this section. It's no longer straight. And I've done it on the bottom, what you see the ones on the bottom here, but I haven't done it on the ones on top. So when I flip it around, we can get an idea of the contrast, the difference this change has made. So I've added curvature here, and these are still straight lines. And you can see the big difference that it makes. This area is trying to run in a straight line, and the bottom has curvature. And it not only has curvature in this top view, but it also has curvature in the vertical direction. Here's what's involved with replacing a single one of these curves. I need a silk post used as a reference frame to draw a sketch mostly in the top view. That would be this sketch here, and then that sketch is going to create this curve, but that curve is still in a plane. I then create a second silk post that is perpendicular to the first one, and now I can create a second sketch in elevation, and I create a second curve. I can combine these two into a single 3D curve. Now it's important to know that they're not completely mushed together. It is still a 4-point control polygon, and that's what makes this work. So setting this up is a little bit tricky, but there is a payoff to the work, in my opinion, because when I edit those two sketches, I find that I have an excellent view to work in, and I can dimension things in a meaningful way. See, this view right here is not quite exactly, but it's almost a top view. And then when I look at the different plane, in the vertical plane, when I edit this guy, let me hide the other views. When I edit this guy, it's not exactly a right side view, but it's almost a right side view. So when I'm editing the elevations, I'm working in an area that's meaningful. It's important to know that the two sketches are not independent. See here, I have transferred a line over from the first sketch, and it dictates the X position of these points. And so the only thing I can still decide in this sketch is the elevation. But that gives me curvature in one sketch and curvature in another sketch, and it still results in a single curve that controls the entire shape. I had full resolution here, so it's going to take a second to update. All right. So that's what we need. There's a bunch of steps. This is the way I like to edit in the end, so it's worth it for me to set it up that way. And what I get is I go from these straight lines to completely 3D curves. But let me show you what I mean about the angles. When I hide these views and I turn on my primary curves and surfaces here, when I edit this sketch, this is a very meaningful sketch orientation for me to be in. I go from one point on the layout exactly to another point on the layout on the x-axis. And the other side is very similar. So I can use the same dimensioning scheme. And yeah, all right. So how do we do that? Start by basically hiding everything. And so we're going to be working all the way back to here, all the way back to the layouts, and we're going to build off of these. But specifically, we're going to be working off of the section layouts. I want a coordinate system that goes from here to here, but is otherwise as flat as possible, as close to the XY plane as possible. How can I do that? I have the origin here, the x-axis here. Well, a point that if the plane contains this point, it'll be as flat as it can possibly be. So this is my origin, this is my x reference, this is a vague y-axis reference. I select this point, and I go back to the first sketch, and I select this point, and then I create a silk pose. It gives me a silk pose 3P by 4 points. And I go to the data, let's make it big, let's do 300, this is just a reference size. And right there I say, hey, something went wrong. It's pointing this, the long line, which is the x-axis, is pointing this way instead of that way. That's because the first point I clicked and the last point I clicked are on the same object, and FreeCAD scrambles the selection. It doesn't actually track which order you click things in. It tracks by object you click on. So if I do here and then here and here, it remembers the order they're in. But if I do here, then come back, it doesn't remember. There's a really easy solution. There's an option here to swap the XY references. And when I do that, boom, my x-axis snaps back to being towards this guy. And that's where I want to work. That's the setup I want. I select this, I create a sketch, objects XY. This is where I want to be. It's not exactly an XY sketch, but it has the advantage that the point I want to include on here is, if it'll let me click it, is exactly on the x-axis. And that's going to allow me to have a very simple dimension. Finally I got it. It's going to allow me to have a very simple dimensioning scheme. I'm going to put myself back in the view. I'm going to go ahead and hide the layouts, and see here, I grab the bottom corner of the sketch. And here, just going to make a fairly standard sketch for me. And we'll come back and edit these sketches later to make them have an appropriate shape. But for now, let's just do our usual opposite sides equal. This guy here, I'm going to make it parallel to the x-axis, which happens to match the start to finish. Then I'm going to make them all equal. And then here, now, because I'm starting off of the origin, I can use a constraint lock, which is something we couldn't do with the sketches that were around the layouts. But here I can, so I'm going to. So this sketch is not going to flop around. And right here, I'm going to make this fairly small, but not too small. Let's just do minus 50. So it'll be just a little bit of curvature, but it'll be something. It won't be 0. Actually, we can do a little bit more. Let's do minus 75. Okay, so let's make all of these sketches. We'll make all of these sketches with this default. Okay. So now that I have this sketch, I can make a polygon from it, and then I can make a curve from it. We'll end up deleting these curves and keeping just the polygons, but it's really helpful for the explanation I'm giving right now to show you that this has a curve and it's on a very specific plane. The plane is from this point to this point, and remember that these are not on the x-axis plane, right? We're independently positioning these sections, so it can be anywhere. And now I have a very convenient plane to draw this line. Okay, now I want a plane that's basically like this guy, but vertical. So what's the simplest way I can create that? It turns out that if I just do the same thing I did before, and I create this guy, and I'll just show you with this guy as an example. I've swapped XY, that's fine. All these parameters go in priority. This happens first, then this happens, and finally this happens. If I just choose YZ for this guy, it's going to flip around all over the place. If I go XY, it goes back to what I want. If I go ZX, This is kind of what I want for a vertical plane, but it has the x-axis pointed the wrong way. So that's annoying. Okay, I'm going to put this back here because this is the one we created for this sketch, and I really shouldn't be playing around with it like that. I'm going to remove the equal constraint, untangle this, put the equal constraint back, and not play around with this guy anymore. So here's what I want. I want to create another one like this, but I want it to be opposite. I want the axes to be in opposite directions, so when I set YZ, I get the vertical plane, and I don't have to use a ZX. That's all twisted. Here's how I do that. There's so many ways to make these guys, I can't completely explain it right now, so just follow along if you want to do this. Click this point as the origin, this point as the x-axis, this point as the y-axis, so I've reversed what they are in this case. I create a new one. I'm going to give it also a size of 300. I'm going to change its colors so we can tell the difference to these colors. Now I take this guy and I go to its data, and if I say YZ, look at what happened. Because I picked the things in the reverse order, when I say YZ, this is the x-axis, which is what I want, but it's pointed upside down. If I do flip X, that doesn't do what I want because it's backwards now. So I'm going to say false right here. I'm going to try flip Y. Okay, this gives me what I want. It's going from here towards the point on the next layout, but now the y-axis is pointing up. That's what I want, because now when I put a sketch on here, it's going from this section to this section, and it points up, which is, if you'll notice here, very close to a right side view. So this is a good way for me to work. I'm going to import this point into the model right here from the bottom corner. I'm going to hide the layout so you can see it. And this is almost all I need for references. Now, remember I said this sketch is not going to be completely free. This sketch needs to follow along. So let's turn this back on right here. This sketch needs to follow along with this one, but looks like I made a mistake when I was fixing this sketch. Let's see, where's this suck was? Oh, this guy right here. I still had a flip right here. I just when I was playing around, I just need to undo this flip, and now the red coordinate system is in the proper orientation, and this sketch has come back to where I want it to be. Okay, but now this means that I need to adjust this guy, and here we go. So here's the correct set of options. The first one, pick here, pick here, pick here, but you have to swap X, Y, and then you get everything else at default is what you want. Then when you do the next one, you pick the points off of this coordinate system. You do not swap. You set flip X to true, and then you choose YZ, and that'll give you this one. So now we can go in and edit it. I've imported this point. Now I want this second sketch, which will also be a 3-line sketch. It will be matched at the endpoints. And all I want to do in this sketch is set the Z height. I want to get XY from here, but only get the Z from this sketch. So to get a good visual representation of what's happening, I'm going to import this line right here. Then I'm going to create reference lines to the first point and the second point. If it'll let me, it doesn't want to let me, that's okay. I'll just match them by hand. I'm going to make these guys this guy, both of them parallel to the local y-axis. And now I just have two different heights I can set. Let me show you why I'm doing that. And then we'll come back and edit the sketch a little bit more. But this is good because things will be nice and visible. If you remember from the first sketch, I created a control polygon right here. And then I made a curve from that. Well, real quick, let me do the same thing with this one. The new sketch. Give it a control polygon and give it a curve. Okay, so there are two independent curves, more or less. But if I edit the first one, specifically the x and y values, see, can I do this? Yeah. This one still follows the x values. Basically, the x values are getting transferred. Okay, so now here's what I do. Remember, these curves were just for show, just to show you what these control polygons were doing. Now I'm going to say that the one that is in basically the top view, the first one we made, this one here, I'm going to say that that's the driver, and this guy here, the lower one, is the Z follower. If I have these two selected, and I hit the tool to create a control polygon, I get a combination. Look at it from the front. This new guy right here, and the curve that it creates is a combination of this guy and this guy. So I've taken the x and y values from here and pulled them in the Z by this guy. I'm going to turn on all the curves. And in this red coordinate system, when I look at it from the top, the curve appears to match exactly what I see in this plane. But when I look at it from the side, it appears to match what I see in this plane. And I mean, when you're looking at it in the right plane, it is an exact match. So this curve, this final curve, is my 3D curve, and I don't need these other two previous ones. They were just to show you what it was doing. So now, when I look at it in this view of this sketch, I only see one polygon because the new one on the underside is completely aligned. And then when I edit the other sketch, it's the same thing. I appear to only see one polygon because the new one is completely aligned to the second sketch as well. But this only works perfectly if you import this line and make sure that the x values come from the first sketch. Okay, let's set some reasonable values on these heights. I'm going to look at my layout. I'm going to look at my layout in the YZ. Okay, so I have one line right here that I'm following, and then the other one is over here. So I don't want these heights to be too crazy. I just want just a little bit. As a matter of fact, when I'm looking at it in the right view, this line should be almost completely flat. We just want a little bit on here. So I'm just going to take this guy, and I'm going to say KL. Oops, well, didn't like that. That's okay. Take our time. Did it create constraints? No, it didn't create constraints. Let's hide all this other stuff. We don't need to look at anything right now except our sketch. I just want to go with this guy right here, KL. Okay, this time it did it, but I don't want the horizontal dimension. I'm just using it to create this height. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one, KL. And I don't want the horizontal. I'm just using it to create the height. But I have a stable positive and negative. So this guy right here, let's do -20. And this guy right here, -20 as well. Why not? Let's see, if I align it to the right view, yeah, this is more or less horizontal. We don't need to worry about these values too much until we have really shaped the first sketch. Okay. So now let's think about that. Let's think about shaping this first sketch. All I really care about at this point is the first sketch itself and the second sketch itself. So let's edit this guy. What do we want here? Well, we certainly don't want this much. Let's go back to minus 75. Okay, and if I look at it in top view, this gives me an idea of how much angle I'm creating here. It's okay to have angle here because we're going to blend, but we don't want too much. Let's close. Okay, it's so that the curve updates. And I say, you know, this curve is just a little bit too even. I really want this curve to come out this way a lot more and then come into the tail. So let's do that. Say these equals, like, I don't really want things to be equal anymore. Or parallel, as a matter of fact. I'm going to turn on auto update. And right now, because it's not attached to the main model, all it updates is this curve itself. So now I've aligned myself to the top view, so I have an idea of how it's behaving with respect to the horizontal. And I'm going to say I want some nice, almost straight along the sides, and then a nice acceleration of the curvature towards the end. So I want long, shorter, short. Something like that. That might be okay. And then here, so pick this point and just use constraint lock. I don't know why I put 0 on there. That's very strange. Maybe it didn't like that I did the window select. KL. Okay, this time it didn't do anything weird. I'm just going to edit this and say 86, 80. And then this minus 78, minus 80. Then we do the same thing on this one. KL. And here, what am I going to do? 400. And then minus 120 maybe. Okay, this line here is still rising above horizontal, so at least I don't want to have a reversed pinch here, but a little bit of angle between the lines is fine. So that should be fine. So here we've got 80, 80, 420. Okay. Now that we've got these values, let's see about adjusting the heights here. So I go to this sketch, put myself in the right view, so I have a reference to what I consider horizontal to be. And let's see here. Okay, change the dimensioning scheme. I want this, don't want that. What do I want? See, because it has shifted my points and I need to follow along with what it's done. I want this to be mostly flat along this portion is fine, and then just a little bit of angle once I get to the tail. So if I did this, it would be curving too late. So if I split the difference, so I don't have a parallel on these. I should do that. Parallel here and parallel here. I wasn't supposed to delete this. I was confused about what they were. These are the features that make it follow the X value. Parallel piece. Okay. Right, so all I have is 2 dimensions, and I can pretty much select them independently. I look at this guy, hit KL. I want the vertical, but I don't want the horizontal. And I'm going to adjust this guy to be more or less horizontal here. If anything, elevated on the left. So I'm going to do minus 40. What does that do? Okay, it's still going under a little bit too much. So I'm going to do minus 30. Okay, that's fine. Minus 30 is just barely above horizontal. That's fine. I'm going to do the same thing on here. KL. Delete the horizontal one. And then here, minus 26 and minus 25. Okay, so it's a very soft lift towards the tail. And as you can see, this is taking a while to do all these little details. But now I have my curve, and now I have my control polygon. And let's compare that to, I'm gonna hide all the layout. Let's compare that to what we had before with the primary curves and the primary surfaces. So you see, this is gonna make a big difference. This is going to make a big difference in the shape of this object. And I can control it from a top view, and I can still set the height from what is basically the right view. So yeah, like I said, it's taking a while to do these, and especially because I stopped and was explaining a lot of things on all the necessary steps to create this 3D curve so that it can be controlled from planes that you choose. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to substitute this curve into this object so we can see the whole thing updating. And next time we will knock out 7 more of those to do them all. All right. So how do I swap this in? I want to, first of all, we're going to substitute the polygon. This curve was just to show you what was happening. Now that we have this polygon ready, we're going to apply this polygon to this curve. But not only to this curve, we're going to apply this polygon to this curve, but also to the 2 grids that touch this corner. So we're going to do a substitution in 3 objects. In all 3 objects, we will be replacing control poly 2P 021. We're going to replace 021 with this guy. And then we'll have to reverse its orientation to fix the model, which is an important thing to know how to do. Ready? First, we're going to do it in this curve, but we can't remember 21. We can't forget 21. Okay? Right here, replace link to this guy. And right here, it's only updated this curve. I need to update 2 grids. Which grids do I want to update? I want to update the first control grid 4 4s that touch this edge. So there's this one. Which polygon do I replace? 021. That's why you can't forget it when you replace it in the curve. So here, I replace 021 with this guy. And bam, this grid has jumped to the new polygon. But now I'm detached at this edge. So I need to update this grid as well. I'm going to hide this polygon so I can see this. I'm going to hide this control grid so I can see this polygon clearly. I go to this guy. Which one do I want to replace? 021. And now I have swapped in my new polygon into this curve and both grids that touch this edge. But something's busted. And I knew it was coming. So here's what happened. I drew this sketch from this guy to this guy. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work from the tail towards the nose. But when I originally built the topology, I was working the other way around. If you look at our cut points, you'll see that we had actually started from this corner here. We were working from here and going all the way around. That means that our curves were supposed to run in the opposite direction, but I don't want to follow that rule anymore. What's breaking the model right now is that because this polygon runs in the opposite direction, these points, these cut points on this curve don't match anymore. I don't want to redo my sketch. I don't want to rebuild everything. All I need to do is then say, hey, this polygon came from a sketch that ran in this direction, because that's the way I want to run my sketch. But I would like everything else to run in the opposite direction. So I just take this polygon and I use the reverse option on it. And when I use the reverse option, it says leave the sketch alone, but reverse everything based on this polygon anyways. And look what happens to these points right here when I hit F5. Now the errors have disappeared. And I can look at my final surfaces and everything has updated. It's very distorted because we've only done one of the curves. But here you can really see how much impact what we did had. Instead of being all linear edges with a little bit of blending, we have true curves and blending. So we did it one time for this lower edge. Let me turn this off. We did it one time for this lower edge. We need to do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. We need to replace all these spans. And so for all these spans, we will have to do this. So I did it all for one thing, including the swaps, one time. In the next episode, we're just going to plow on through and do it 7 more times. All right? And I hope you will be there to follow along. And if not, you can get the model at the end of the episode.